Okay, so this is the Gospel Hall meeting I pulled up on YouTube. Um, this is because when I was a kid, when I was very young, I went to the Gospel Hall for a little bit. And so I wanted to talk a little bit. I guess I did talk a little bit about the Gospel Hall. It was a Protestant church, I believe, but there were some very marked differences. One of the ones, and I don't think that may not be the case today, but back at that time, they didn't keep Christmas. I guess they didn't fully keep Christmas, but every year in December, they had something they called the Sunday school treat, and that they would have something for the kids. Um, and I think there were some other differences. I'm not real sure. But how the gospel call came to be an option for me to be able to go to, we have to go back to, like I was mentioning before, my grandpa's sisters, and primarily three of them, or that I knew of: Aunt Alice, Aunt Mary, and Aunt Fran. They were my great aunts, and they went to the Gospel Hall, and they discovered it when they were younger. I think it might have been just um, Aunt Alice, who was older. I think she might have been like a young adult, and the other ones, like Aunt Fran and Aunt Mary, they may have been in their teens. I'm not sure about that, though. But I think they found it fairly young. I think my grandpa had three other sisters: Aunt Geraldine, Aunt Helen, and Aunt Lois. I didn't know them as well. Definitely didn't know Aunt Helen because she was killed in an automobile accident, either before I was born or when I was a baby. I don't remember for sure. But she was the oldest, Aunt Helen. And just an interesting side note about Aunt Helen: her first husband was, like I said, she was my grandpa's sister. Well, she married my grandma's sister, which was my grandpa's husband. And so they had double connections there in the family. My grandma, um, my grandma Fuller, and my grandma Brockway, her maiden name, she had a brother named Uncle Braden, or not Braden, I'm sorry, Uncle Gladwin. And Uncle Gladwin was Aunt Helen's husband, but he died, I think, of pneumonia or some kind of respiratory disease in the 1920s. So she was very young when he died, and she remarried and had a number of kids, but she never went to the Gospel Hall, and I don't think Aunt Lois did either. But Aunt Geraldine did. I just didn't know her as well. Now, um, the Gospel Hall wasn't the first church that I went to, and I'm going to mention another church before we get into me going to the Gospel Hall. But I just wanted to give the background to the sisters. And for a little more background, Aunt Fran lived just a couple of blocks from our house. We lived down in 1509 Leroy Street in Jackson, Michigan. She lived like 3 blocks away on Leroy Street. And so we used to go and got to know her really well. We used to go to her house, and we used to tell ghost stories on the porch and eat apples. They would go to get you pick apples from the orchards, and we'd sit there and have a bushel basket of apples on the porch and sit and eat them, and that was nice. And at that time, we went trick-or-treating and kept Halloween. That would change, but at that time we did. And she would always have something like candy apples or something special for us. And and then my Aunt Mary was a nurse, and she used to take care of us when we were kids. When we got sick and had to stay home from school, she worked. Well, you know what? I'm going to wait because I want to go into a little more detail, and I see I'm running out of time, so we'll stop it right there, and I'll backtrack a little bit when I go to the next one.